What about this from Rodri? The difference was in here, our heads. When they came and faced us here at the Etihad, I saw them, these guys, they don't want to beat us, they just want to draw, you know? And the mentality, we wouldn't do it the same way. It's interesting, Rodri said it was that moment they realised they could overtake Arsenal, which of course inevitably they did. Kieran, is that fair?
No. It's not for me. It's an interesting comment, but I have to disagree. To play 38 games in the Premier League and try and play for a draw in one away game against the best team in the world, it doesn't mean that, you know, the mentality is less. I think, in fact, to not expect them to do that is just naive. For me, it came down to the Villa game for Arsenal. But yeah, you know, he has a right to say that because he's the champion.
Why is he saying it, do you think, Kieran?
I don't know. Maybe he was probably, you know, wound up a little bit this season. They had a bit of a dip, didn't they? They weren't as good as they were last season. And I think that he probably felt that was a bit unfair to say that, and Arsenal were chasing him down, and so he probably wanted to put a little bit of a reality check into everyone by saying that you know, they're still the best.
But I mean, there is some truth to that comment. Arsenal rolled the dice in a sense at the Etihad, and it was getting near the end of the season, and we saw Liverpool, albeit at home in the game against City, run them absolutely ragged, and I mean run them ragged as we'll have seen a City side of this quality for quite some time. And so there are many games, and the Villa being one of them, the Villa game being one of them over the course of a season where you can look back. But there's no doubt when it gets to the business end of the season where, you know, the City game was at the Etihad, that they played a card that was slightly different to their normal hand.
I don't remember everyone crying about it. I don't remember going, oh no, they've got to go there, they should have gone there for the victory. I think everyone kind of saluted the tactics, agreed it was the best way to approach the game, and it's only now with hindsight.
Well, I think you'd have to go back and check the tape, because I can only speak for me, but I think I said this is fine, but we'll find out at the end of the season if this has been the right way to go about it. And the answer now, in hindsight, is no. Did Arsenal approach it in the same way they approached other games? No, they decided early in the game that they were not going to open themselves up. Now, my opinion is they were more than good enough to go there and put pressure on City and potentially take the 3 points. They decided to do it another way. And ultimately, at the end of the season, this is going to be one of the games that you look at and say, and listen, Arteta will come out and say the same thing. You know, this is really, the 1 point was a great result. He didn't win the league. He didn't win it. So you have to look at all these games and, you know, ifs, buts and maybe. But we saw City, when they were pressured by the other team that was in the title race for 90% of the season, be ragged and be got at. Arsenal, what you can argue, you can do whatever, you can say whatever you want. The fact is, Arsenal did not put City under pressure. They said a point's enough, and we'll see what happens at the end of the season. Well, what happened was they didn't win the league.
Mario, can you understand Rodri using that as motivation going into those final games?
Yeah, guarantee. And I think it was probably one of the motivations too. You know, because sometimes when you're in the dressing room, even if your coach would say that, you understand, they say, like, he might say, look, we played Arsenal, we faced them, but now we know what their philosophy was about the game. We are going to go the opposite of it, and we're going to win all our games. So towards the end, of course, they knew if we slip up, it's because of our own mistake. So in the dressing room, you're going to talk about that. That is one of the key things that we talk about. And I understand what Kieran says, of course, you know, like it could be something that he said after the game, but I think this was definitely one of the motivation parts of them, of saying that. And what you guys talked about, if you want to win the title, you sometimes got to take a risk, Dan. You said it too, like when it happened, when they went there, we said like, good result. Of course, I would have said the same thing, good result. If you play against the champions of your league and you draw against it, yeah, you're not going to worry about it. You're going to be like, oh, you did well. But that is not the case. If you want to win it, you got to hurt them too. And I think that's why he also said that, because he wanted to spy more. But you got to hurt those guys. You cannot go there and draw. You got to gamble and say, I want to win this game and I'm going to win it. As a team and as a manager too.
Go on, Gab.
No, I just want to say, there's this wild stat that if you look at it, if you look at City's performances against the top 6 teams in the league this season, the points that they got, it's not like they went and won all those games. In fact, their performances were actually pretty poor. Where they won the league is that they were devastating against the bottom 14 teams, and they never dropped points, and they were relentless. So I only kind of buy this bravery against the big clubs thing to a point. If anything, you could turn it around and say, well, you know, when they played Liverpool, when they played Chelsea, who got a point there, who aren't particularly good, you know, they dropped points at the Etihad, and that took the sting out of them and whatever. I think this is all just hot air going back and forth. It's like saying, oh, look, if Heung-min Son puts that chance away, then Arteta looks like a genius for playing like a draw, for playing for the draw at the Etihad. You know, you can always go and you know, play Monday morning quarterback like that.
Yeah, but you have to take responsibility in your own house, and City. Yeah. Look, whether we look at City or not, whether we look at City's games against the big guys this year, which they weren't always successful, as we know, but it wasn't for the lack of trying. City were not there to be scrutinised, really. They had nothing to prove. Arsenal and Liverpool this season were the teams that had something to prove. City did not. So, you know, they've been there, they've seen it, they got the T-shirt, they have everything. They didn't have to go anywhere to any big team and prove anything. Arsenal did. And you have to own it. And then if you own it, you're not worried about Heung-min Son missing a chance. You're not worried about these results because you've owned it. And as Mario said, the best really go out there and they grab it. They're not frightened of losing. They're not frightened of losing. And I felt Arsenal, and it wasn't the only game. Of course it wasn't the only game. But we've been there as players in title run-ins. You don't really look back, win or lose, on a game that was in September, but you really look back at the games if you drop points 6 weeks before the end of the season, because that's when everybody's biting their nails. People are not biting their nails in September, but they are at the end of April, they are in the beginning of May. Players are biting their nails, fans are biting their nails, and that's when you have to own it. And Arsenal made a decision, and they were the team that had something to prove, not City. Arsenal were the team that had something to prove. They had a great season in terms of performances, but their decision was that they didn't want to attack this team away from home and potentially get the 3 points. They rolled the dice at the end of the season, which is when it really matters for players and coaches, and at the end of the day, it was the wrong one.
Do you think what's happened at Arsenal over the last 2 seasons, finishing runners-up on both occasions, Kieran, could have an effect going into next season? Is there going to be like a runners-up fatigue there?
Not with Mikel in charge, I don't think. I fully expect the board to back him again in the summer. I'm sure
who do they need, Kieran? Who would you buy?
I mean, well, of course, you know, everyone's screaming for an out-and-out striker, which would be nice, but it has to be worth it. It has to be a 30-goal-a-year striker and nothing less, really. But I'm sure Gab's the man to tell you whether that's possible or not. And then, you know, depending on whether Thomas Partey leaves, that has to be addressed immediately. And then I would love to see a backup for Saka. I think we've been asking a lot for him to perform at the highest level every single game. And it goes back again to, you know, how Phil Foden has been managed over the last 4 or 5 years compared to Saka, and it's completely different. So, but I do expect that, you know, I expect the board to back them, and I expect the recruitment to be just as good as it has been in the last 18 months. You know, so I expect the level to be increased again, and you know, whether City increase their level again and the gap is still there, that remains to be seen. But for me, the gap has gotten smaller between Arsenal and City this year, and for me, Mikel won't accept it any other way.
This is a perfect time to just go and strengthen this Arsenal team. They're
right.
in very, very strong.
Do you agree with Kieran? They need a number 9.
I mean, if you can get a Saka back up, a wide player back up, fine. But I mean, Trossard's done a very good job, both backing up and in several positions and coming in. What is more concerning for me would be the central front man, whoever that is. Hurricane Timber's coming back, should be back. So that's an extra defender in there, which should suffice, I would imagine. And I think arguably as important, maybe equally as important as a front man, for me, would be, I think, Partey, they only need one of Partey and Jorginho. Right? And either of those, for me, are only going to be backups. They need to sign an out-and-out quality midfielder that's going to complement Rice and Odegaard. And then they go, if there's a problem there, they go to the bench. But for me, they need somebody, and Jorginho's a good player and Partey's a good player. But I think ultimately they're going to become squad players. They were squad players for a lot of this season. Part of that was injury, particularly with Partey. But I think they need a quality, if they're going to really go for it, they need another quality midfielder in there to continue to get the best and more out of Declan Rice, and he was brilliant, and even more out of Martin Odegaard. If they do that, because that's the hub of it all. Yep. You look at City, we talked about Rodri. It's De Bruyne, it's Bernardo Silva. It's very important. He went out and bought Phillips, it didn't work, so he bought Kovacic, who's been all around the globe, Real Madrid, Croatian international, winning Champions Leagues, $25 million, whatever it was. It was quite cheap and cheerful in this day and age, but it was clever. And Arsenal need to make sure in the middle of that park they are adding to those two guys that I talked about, because they're quality footballers. Odegaard and Rice are quality. And if they can add to that in there, and then it's one of the two others are off the bench, then I think that would be a big step for them.
Gab, it's that time of year, isn't it, when we start talking about war chests?
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember is that Arsenal did not have any Champions League income last year. They made big losses last year and the year before that. And then, of course, they spent big in the summer on Declan Rice and Kai Havertz. So, it's great to draw this wish list. We can identify, what they can, what they want to hope to do. But equally, they have to stay within profit and sustainability rules. I'm not sure that they can go out and spend the way they spent last year. Certainly not in net terms, unless they sacrifice a piece. For my money, I'm a big Kai Havertz fan. I don't think goal scoring is a problem on this club that finished as the top goal scorers in the entire Premier League. Maybe you think about upgrading his backup. Sorry, Eddie. I agree that a defensive midfielder is somebody important, but again, maybe it's a younger player who you groom in, maybe for a year, as long as you have Jorginho and Partey under contract and some sort of rotation with those three. I think we're more likely to see tweaks of that nature. Maybe you look at bringing Zinchenko back as an alternative in midfield if you need it. I'd worry about a backup to Odegaard. And more generally, this is a team that in the last 2 years has had very, very few injuries, certainly compared to United or Chelsea or Liverpool. You have to, you can't take for granted that you're going to be this injury-free next season either.